plan to share some experiences I've had. I'm not going to say I'm going to teach you because I think we can learn from each other. I'm not the expert, but maybe I just have a few years of experience over your experiences as of today. So with that, let me start off by saying good afternoon to everybody. A lot of things have been changing with respect to our environment. Most recently, we had COVID-19 forcing most of us to support 100% work from home environments. Very, very different from what we used to support most probably in premise. And prior to that, we saw a lot of businesses racing to reinvent themselves through various digital transformations. Data center operations was slowly adopting the cloud and moving away from in-premise. Project managers were wrestling with the Scrum Masters, and projects from the traditional waterfall approach was now adopting a more agile and iterative approach. We saw a steady explosion of data acquisition and information analytics churning out insights and answers. With a move to more rapid iterations and quick delivery of results, our traditional planning, consisting of careful definition of end states, was being set aside. Thus, now very important to look back and see what set of tools do we have today to help us plan in this new environment. In my 30+ years of working in the industry, 5 simple processes stood out for me, and they withstood the changes and the onslaught of new technologies. These 5 are visioning, joint business planning, portfolio and road mapping, budgeting, and lastly, managing of key stakeholders. Let's move to the next slide, please. Allow me to talk about the first process. Vision is normally defined as a desired future state, expressed in the present terms. Why is it important that we take this context or semantics of stating the vision? I think it has to do with a bit of psychology and psychiatry, wherein we try to psych ourselves up as if we have already achieved the end state we desire. As they say, visioning is the first step to achieving our goals or our objective. Seeing that we are already in the end state is half of the battle. Now, there are some key characteristics of what a good vision is. First and foremost, vision should be aligned to company or business vision. IT vision cannot stand on its own. Quick test or quick question we may ask is what we have stated in the vision something that we could achieve in the next 2 to 3 years? If the answer is yes, then our vision is not good enough. That's very short term. That might be an MVP in an agile sprint. And lastly, vision is more eloquently declared in tandem with the mission. Why? The mission gives us the reason for being, gives us the purpose of why we are doing the things that we are doing. That's the first step. We have to craft out a very good vision. No matter what you put in your vision, no matter what content is in that vision, what needs to be key is we don't need to go to the very last detail and specificity we normally require for our business projects. A good vision should just point us in the right direction where the company needs to go. A good vision should not have our detailed plans. Planning in its most simplest terms is just a demand-supply balancing. Demand, in our case, normally comes from business objectives, goals, and requirements. While the supply comes from our IT capabilities, operations, technologies, and solutions. Strategies are specific choices we make and should always be driven by the business. They are normally formulated by careful understanding and nuances of our 4C environment. 4Cs being the customer, the community, our culture, and our competition. There should be a clear business value for each of the strategies we formulate. And let me expound a bit of what value means. Value has taken on very different quantifiable KPIs, but what has stuck as key in defining or quantifying value is only three things. One, value is all about increase in revenue. So anything we do in IT, any project we undertake, any new technology we implement, the first metric, the first quantifiable metric by which to measure whether we've created value or not is, has it increased revenue of our company? The second dimension of value is still very monetary in nature, but it's now all about efficiency and savings. Have we delivered savings to the operational costs of the company? And the third dimension of value is, have we created a new business capability for our company? If we cannot quantify our intervention in any of these three, then we start to question, why are we doing these things? What value are we creating or delivering to the business? It's very important that we're able to answer and slot in everything that we do in either one of these three dimensions. JBP should clearly state business outcomes and not a set of activities or just projects. And lastly, creating these JBPs, we should go through a prioritization process with our business counterparts, normally the business heads and the key managers of the business. So just to end the topic on JBPs, the JBP is a formal agreement with the business unit head on operational priorities, service levels, and projects. So it's not just projects. The BAU is included. And the KPI for those BAUs and projects, the service levels, are also included. So that's the second tool. Let's proceed to the next tool. The collection of JBPs we've created with the different business unit heads comprises our source for now creating our portfolio or roadmap. This is the demand side, and we now need to create the supply side of things. There are various methodologies we may use to organize, analyze, and prioritize our projects. But no matter what method you choose, nothing is fully superior over the other. They have their different purposes. And I will run through some of those methodologies and what I see as benefits of using one over the other. The first methodology is classifying projects and activities as either it's a run, a grow, or transform. So run means it's basic day-to-day operations. Grow means growing the revenue or business of the company. And transform is creating something new. And normally, this is one way to classify or categorize your different pieces of work. Now, when do you want to use this? You normally want to use this categorization or methodology if you want to be able to focus on growth, because you clearly declare what projects and activities are in the growth category, and you can choose to disproportionately focus on them. Another way to organize and look at your portfolio is using the financial, customer, operations, and organization categories. And normally, you want to use this methodology if you want to have a balanced portfolio. So you want an efficient business as usual or status quo. You use a balanced portfolio approach, which is this categorization methodology. There's another one which uses and classifies work as either it's lights on, it's table stakes, or it's differentiation. So lights on refers to, as the word implies, keeping the lights on for basic operations. Table stakes are things you need to do, not necessarily because they deliver value, but you need to do them, otherwise you might be out of a business. So normally these are the compliance or regulation pieces of work. And some of them actually relates to risks too. And those are referred to as table stakes. These are sets of activities. If you don't do, you might be out of business. But they don't necessarily give you a competitive advantage, because all of your competitors are actually doing that also. And the last piece is differentiation, which is what is it you will do or deliver differently such that you deliver a competitive advantage over your competition. And normally you adopt this methodology if you want to focus on creating a competitive advantage. And the last one is the traditional, I do my basic operations or BAU, business as usual activities, and I do projects. That's the traditional project management approach, right? Anything that's operational is BAU. Anything that changes that operations is a project. And normally you take this approach if you traditionally just want to manage your project executions in your portfolio. So those are examples of different methodologies and the key differentiation or advantage of using one over another. So to end, no matter how you categorize your work activities, there's only two things you need to keep in mind. No matter which of the methodologies above you choose, there are only two things that are critical. One, any activity or project you engage in needs to have a measurable way of assessing progress and completion. The second piece is anything we do, once completely completed and delivered, should have created business value. And I go back, definition of business value is in 3 dimensions: increased revenue, delivered savings, and new business capabilities. Okay, we now have the portfolio of projects. What do we do? Normally, in basic operations, you go through what we call our capacity check. And the capacity check leads to a process called prioritization. So what I'm sharing with you is the 2x2 matrix of, it's a methodology to prioritize. And normally you classify into 4 quadrants your list of projects. Projects that are of high value and very urgent normally are what we call strategic projects. And strategic projects should be our top priority. They deliver high value in a quick span of time. There are projects that are of lower value, but they're still very urgent. Normally, this will be things that can be classified as table stakes. And what we need to do with this set of projects is to protect them, because we still need to execute them even if they are low value, because it will adversely either increase risk or put us out of business. The third quadrant are high value projects, but they're not as urgent as the strategic projects. And what we need to do with this set of projects is to continually prioritize them to get them to be active. There's a last set of projects, which is obviously the low value and the low urgency. And the action step we want to take here is to delay or stop. Now, if you will look at the 4 quadrants and the 4 courses of action for each of the quadrants, one thing is highlighted as most critical and important amongst these 4. Delaying or stopping projects is the single most powerful intervention to focus both resources and accelerate project completion over being a strategic project, over protecting those set of projects, over continually trying to prioritize and make active those projects. The delaying and stopping action is the single action that makes or delivers the biggest impact in terms of portfolio prioritization. And maybe I'll get back to this concept of why delaying and stopping is one of the most important things you can do to deliver your projects sooner, cheaper, and faster. Now, one thing I've also noticed is, and I guess the industry group on enterprise architects will totally agree with this, is there actually is a common architecture we see across different industries today. And it involves a foundational IT component of the architecture. And well, in the case of First Philippine Holdings, we call it the minimum viable IT. And this is common across various subsidiaries in the group. And it involves things like maybe your data management standards, your infrastructure standards, your networking, your central computing, your end user computing. So things that are fairly common and foundational across all companies in different industries. Over and above this is where you build now the things that are what we term solutions to business issues. So I just gave an example here of four groupings. There could be digital customer apps, which is how we deal with the customer and surround the customer. There's an Internet of Everything, which is really part of the digital transformation we're seeing in the environment, wherein everything is being connected. We're starting to collect more data and now able to exert remote control over things. And when we say Internet of Everything, it's not just on computing appliances. It could be a light bulb, it could be a light switch, it could be a refrigerator. So it's really the Internet of Everything. The third big grouping here is what we call the OT and integrated control systems applications. So applies mostly to industries with operational controls like manufacturing, power generation, maybe even construction. And the last piece is over and above the foundational items of IT, we also build what we call enterprise business apps. So these are traditional ERPs, general ledgers, management reporting systems, etc. It's very important that we recognize that these common architectures lend itself to a creation of two things: shared services and process or service outsourcing opportunities. The next tool, which or second to the last tool, which I find very useful in terms of creating and harnessing these master plans or roadmaps, is translating now the portfolio we have prioritized into budget components. There was a Gartner study way back in, I think this was in 2016 or 2018. They uncovered that the IT budgets as a percent of revenue has been increasing since 2015. So that's a global trend. Now, obviously, if you look at global trend numbers, the Philippines will be lagging behind slightly, but still following that trend. And what this translates to is most of our companies' IT spend on a per employee basis has been steadily increasing. And that's not a surprise, especially with the advent of more digital transformations and move into more and more applications over the internet. Now, with this broader virtual remote communications in the networking side, information security investment has also been steadily increasing. A second element of that is with the digital transformations, a lot of things IT is getting ingrained in the business units and in the business operations, not just in the IT side of the business. What that translates to is there's significant now IT spending or budgets being run and managed outside of IT. A very good example of that is if you have normally OT applications, operational technology applications, control systems. Normally these are managed by plant engineering folks, not IT. And they will have significant budgets to support and maintain this. A third item is the adoption of the agile development over the traditional waterfall development methodology breeds faster delivery of results, and more iterative approach. But this more iterative approach and focus on minimum viable products translates into a focus of shorter and medium-term outcomes. Now, focus on shorter-term and medium-term outcomes normally is counterproductive to a master planning process wherein you look out 3 to 5 years out. Short-term focuses on 2 to 3 year outlooks. Taken all together, it's very important that we now focus on the budgeting process and how to manage cash in the company. The three external factors of digitalization, agile, and cloud necessitates now us CIOs to partner closely with the C-suite and the other business unit heads in order to manage IT TCO for the company, because not all IT TCO is now controlled by IT. Which now leads me into the last set of tools I find very useful, which is managing now key stakeholders. The C-suite, special focus needs to be given maintaining a healthy relationship with the CFO. Not just because they control budgets, they account for spending, but because they are primarily the C-suite officer who translates everything the company does in monetary terms. Going back to a previous topic I talked about, business value or creating business value. Two of the quantifiable components of business value, which is revenue and savings, has to deal a lot with budgets and spend. Another key stakeholder we need to manage and build a healthy relationship with is the business heads of the various business units. IT is now more prevalent in the business environment. There's a lot of spending outside of IT on IT assets. And we need to have a healthy process by which to govern and manage this. Not control. If you'll notice, I didn't use the word control. Govern and manage. At the end of the day, we have to make sure that we are spending the right things for the right components that deliver the business value. Now, alongside the advent or adoption of Agile, our planning process, using this 5 set of tools that I have mentioned, needs to happen as often as business changes. We need to keep replanning. Planning is not a once a year or annual activity. Like, take the case of the COVID, I'm sure all of you have had to replan your budgets. So all companies have put an extra focus on cash management. We have to continually balance our short-term wins. And short-term wins we get from mostly our agile iterations and the shadow IT that operates today versus long-term sustained benefits. We need to find the sweet spot between short-term and longer term. Not one over the other. It's both of them, and finding the sweet spot, the right combination of short-term and long-term results. Why do we have to manage these healthy relationships? It's not a competition between IT and the rest of the business functions. It's because we all have a single purpose, and it's to create sustainable value for the companies we are employed with. That summarizes the 5 tools I found very useful going through various changes in the IT environment we operate in. And I hope those 5 would also be typically applicable and useful in your individual cases.